Parents of Reddit, in what ways have you almost accidentally killed your children? This happened to a co-worker a few years ago. She loads the baby, about 1 year old or so, in the car seat and heads to work. She drives to work, but forgets to stop at daycare and drop off the kid on the way. Fast forward to 2 hours later, when the daycare teacher called to ask if her kid was sick. She hadn't called to say he was staying home. Co-worker drops everything and races out to the parking lot to find her kid sleeping in the car seat in the car. Luckily, it was winter and not dangerously hot or cold, so the kid was okay. I'll start this by saying I am terrified of frogs. Absolutely terrified. My husband knows this and always terrorizes me with them. So on this fateful day I was holding our 2-week-old son when he walks in and drops a frog down my top. Of course my first reaction was to jump up and throw whatever was in my hands across the room. That was how my son had his first flying lesson. He turned out fine, not a scratch on him. I hope your older child was sleeping on a very uncomfortable couch for a good long while. One day my cousin and I decided to go to a local beach with her baby and my younger sister. Her baby was maybe a year old, so when we went in the water she carried him. We started walking out into the deeper part of the lake but stopped when it was just below chest deep. I was maybe 16 at the time and about 5 feet 8. Out of nowhere she decides she's going to toss me her tiny little son. I wasn't paying attention but luckily saw the poor thing soaring through the air out of the corner of my eye. I turned and went to reach for him, but he had already fallen under the water. I plunged my hands into the murky water and by some miracle grabbed one of his arms and yanked him up. He was completely unscathed. He didn't even take in any water. Needless to say we were pretty quick to get out of the water and never talk about that incident ever again. And that's why I will never take a child near any body of water. I'm 10 years older than my youngest brother, so I'm almost like a second mother to him. When I was 13, I took him, 3, and my other younger brother, 6, to the park to give my mom a break for the afternoon. I was swinging the 6-year-old on the tire swing and the 3-year-old decided he wanted to try. I was wary, but he convinced me he could hang on. He couldn't. He let go and he flew off that dang swing and smacked his head hard on the metal support. It knocked him out cold, and when he came to he was doing that silent scream thing that kids do when they're really freaked out. I called my mom on the phone and met her at the hospital, which was a block away. I gave him a minor concussion and myself a heart attack. I was loading my son into my truck at Costco a few months ago. He was sitting in the cart. I park at the end of the parking lot normally because I do not like door dings and the cart stroller normally takes up a lot of room and I do not want to ding anyone else's car either. Well anyways, he was sitting there singing and just being merry, oblivious to the near-death experience he was about to encounter. Let me set the scene. I am parked almost at the very end of the Costco parking lot in a diagonal spot. There are 3 spots between us and the end of the lot planter. He rides in his seat on the passenger side of my truck's rear seat. The passenger rear door was open. I was at the tailgate loading some stuff into the bed of the truck. My wife had Jetton into the front seat to put his diaper bag away. Then, out of nowhere, a large Suburban comes whipping around the front of my truck to turn around. Because going 3 extra spots and doing it on the road was just too much of a hassle. The Suburban actually hits my rear door. My wife was leaning into the front seat with the front door closed on her legs, or the truck would have hit her door too. Well, the door was hit by the Suburban, swings into the cart my son is sitting in and launches the cart into the path of a huge Ford F350 coming up the row. He manages to stop. The Suburban spins tires to get the heck out of there, hit and run style. I grab my son, who is screaming at this point. The driver of the F350 hightails it out of there as well. I am like, what in Jesus's frick just happened? I call the police to report the collision. Needless to say, we almost lost our son that day. He turns 1 today. Well, there is a silver lining as well. The driver of the F350 was an off-duty cop and actually took the time to chase down the fleeing Suburban. Turns out the driver of the SUV was not licensed and was actually wanted on a warrant. So it was a good catch for him. I find it crappy that he just had little regard for life at that moment. He saw the cart go flying. I heard the lady with him scream at him that he just hit a baby. He still chose to flee. I was painting in the basement and using paint thinner to wash out my brushes. Having 4 children, we had a lot of those plastic cups restaurants give out with kids meals. I used one of the plastic Chuck E. Cheese cups to put the paint thinner in, and after washing brushes for a while it turned a milky white. I went upstairs to grab something and suddenly my 4-year-old ran up the stairs yelling, "My throat is on fire." He had actually mistaken the paint thinner for milk and started chugging. They pumped his stomach and he survived, but my wife has not let me live it down. This will be buried, but I'll tell it anyway. One night in the early 90s, my parents were cooking popcorn. Not popcorn in a microwave, like civilized human beings, but popcorn on the stove, like savages. As we all learned from Scream, this type of popcorn has a tendency to catch on fire, and so it does just that. We look up, and suddenly there are flames shooting up from our delicious evening snack. My sister freaks out a little. She's crying and screaming and just generally losing it, as 6-year-olds tend to do after getting fire safety education in school. My dad calmly walks over to the stove and puts a lid on the pan. My dad's all, "Don't worry, it's out now." My sister is still freaking out and not convinced. I mean, the man didn't put water on it or break out the fire extinguisher or anything. But my dad insists it's fine and tells her to come over and look at the pan. She hesitantly walks over. Dad puts the pan right under her face so she can see the fire is gone. He removes the lid with a flourish, like he's revealing the exquisite main entree to a 5-course meal. And the fire hadn't been smothered yet. The flames ray explode right in my sister's face, singed her eyebrows right off. She still has some trust issues. I just laughed so hard at this one. I mean, your poor sister, but what a great story. 2 weeks ago I fell asleep behind the wheel. I was driving 160 km/h with my 2-year-old son sleeping in the back seat. I was tired but I thought I could just keep driving. Wrong, I nodded off for just 1 second but the car started going to the right, onto the emergency lane. Scared the crap out of me. I stopped at the first gas station and closed my eyes for half an hour. I got home safely after that. I promised myself and my son that I will never keep driving when tired. It's better to take a break and continue later. It's always better to stop. People underestimate the danger of driving tired. Just forget to leave your basement door shut, or the baby gate down once. A nice tumble down a flight of wooden stairs with a sudden concrete stop doesn't do so great for babies. My daughter did that at my mom's house one day when she was about a year old. Got to the bottom, eyes all wide, and hopped up no worse for wear. When I was about 2 I was left at home in the care of my dad, who was busy working. I wandered off and found the tumble dryer, which had just finished its cycle. I had a little play with the dials, and when it started up I popped the door open and climbed in, probably very pleased about a nice warm place to have a nap, and somehow managed to close the door behind me. I was found only a couple of minutes later, Dad wondering why he could hear the tumble dryer working, and was promptly pulled out slightly singed and somewhat sore but otherwise okay. If he hadn't realized I would have been banged about at 160°C for a good half hour. My 2-year-old daughter dongs her head to the side with a curious expression, thinks for a moment then reaches into her mouth and hands me a thumbtack. Scared the crap out of me. She probably wouldn't have died but it would not have been good had she swallowed it. The messed up part is that we don't use tacks for anything and I have no idea where she could have gotten it from. Then there was the time I walked upstairs to where her and her 4-year-old sister were playing. They were playing tug-o-war. Right as I made it to the top step the older sister let go and the 2-year-old went stumbling backwards over the top step into my arms. A couple of seconds later and she could have broken her little neck. As a father I am in constant fear for my children's lives. And mine too since they need me. My mom was a teen mom and very immature. Still is. She wanted to go out with her new boyfriend one day and had asked my grandmother to watch me. She refused since she was always the one taking care of me and told my mom to be a parent for once. I was about 3 months at the time, so my mom and her boyfriend put me in the cab of his truck in my car seat, between his boxes of tools and stereo equipment. There wasn't a seat belt or a way to strap me to the seat so, whatever. They wanted to go do what they wanted and didn't think my safety was an issue. Fast forward about 30 minutes on the freeway and this dude is tailgating the car in front of us while going about 80 miles per hour. The front car brake checks us. Boyfriend tries to swerve out of the way, and we end up flipping 3 times across the freeway. Somehow I only ended up with some minor bruises and abrasions, but it could have been a lot worse. This story always elicited a WTF response from me, but it never really hit me until about 4 weeks ago when my husband and I were driving our newborn home. That's when I really became furious with her and swore that she will not drive my son anywhere. At this point I don't even trust her to watch him alone. But those are stories for a later time. I know that there is no such thing as a perfect parent and I will make mistakes with my little man. But I'm going to try my best to make sure he's always safe. Well, this most definitely won't be seen. And not so much almost killed as almost castrated. But when I was 4/5 my father was giving me a piggyback ride on his shoulders while keeping a slotted screwdriver, metal up, in his back pocket. When he went to slide me off his back, the screwdriver went right up my leg and missed my scrotum by about 2 cms. So yeah. As a parent, you must be freaking insane to read any of these. Being a parent is tough enough, and my paranoia is getting to an uncomfortable level as it is. Why the heck would I subject myself to reading any of these? My poor kid will be in a bubble before lunch. I'm 9 months pregnant and so ready to be done with it. But now I'm hoping she stays in there for another 18 years or so. Not a parent, but supposedly when I was 4 or so my mom walked in on me trying to jump off the top of a bunk bed with the drawstring of the window blinds wrapped around my neck so I could fly like Superman. I'm convinced that the first 5 years of a child's life are spent narrowly averting disaster. Another one about my daughter. She was about 2. We were barbecuing with her dad and my father-in-law and they both insisted on feeding her a hot dog, with the skin on and a bun. Against my protests, she started choking on it and began to turn red. My Phil said, "Oh, just lift your arms up and cough," while her dad said, "There's nothing wrong, she'll be fine," and they both sat there. And then she turned blue. And then she turned purple and then dark purple. I grabbed her by her ankles, held her upside down, and practically pile-drived her into the ground while smacking her in between her shoulder blades until the piece of hot dog popped out. I never want to see that shade of purple ever again. When my kids were younger we all went sledding after a blizzard. We found a hill that was transformed into a giant sheet of ice. My son got the idea to put each foot on a sled and go down the giant ice mountain as if the sleds were skis. My daughter did the same. They zoomed down the ice hill, usually losing their balance halfway down, both legs flying in opposite directions and sending them head first into the ice. Somehow they all survived with 0 head injuries. I have 4 kids, 13, 11, 3, and 20 months. Installed top stair gate and one morning found my daughter had climbed over it and was basically holding on for dear life on the other side of it. The only other thing besides me finding her there would have been her falling violently down the stairs. My husband accidentally left the new baby in the car when he went into the store. He admitted this to me months after it actually happened. I was playing Just Dance and whipped my hand back and straight into my daughter's face. She wasn't facing death, but her face was pretty fricked up for a while. Walked in on my daughter with a bottle of Benadryl and the pills were everywhere. No idea how many she ate, if any. Had to call the poison control where they told me to relax. First day of 2nd grade, my middle daughter ran towards the bus and fell. She was so close to having her head crushed that it still haunts me. Recently went to move a car seat to see that it had been unbuckled for God knows how long. This one is especially upsetting because it means that one of the kids figured out how to do this. Had to take my son to the ER because a hair had wrapped itself around his little toe and I couldn't get it off. It was cutting into his skin. He was only a few weeks old. Please nobody call CPS. I'm doing the best I can, colon. It sounds like your kids are trying their best to destroy themselves and you're doing an excellent job of keeping them alive. As a parent, that's pretty much your job. Keep up the good work. They didn't almost die, but the risk I took is unforgivable. A big ditch behind our house, normally a foot or 2 of water in it, was overflowing after a huge downpour. The culverts under the road were fairly blocked and water was backed up, overflowing the banks, and a foot or so on the road. Well, we all went wading, staying away from the ditch itself because it was flowing fast and hard. My 2 boys, 8 and 14, and 12-year-old nephew, and our black lab who loved water. She got in the water on the upstream side and started getting pulled towards the culvert. where she would have been pulled under and caught under the road, and I let the kid stand there on the edge with me and try to call her over to get out of the current where she could get back on land. Current was stronger, pulled her to the edge of the bank and started to pull her under. I fell flat and grabbed her, managing to get one ear when she was under, and pulled her out by her ear with one hand. And all the time, the boys were standing right next to me, where the bank could have crumbled or washed away and they could have misstepped and gone in themselves. Everyone was okay, everything ended alright. But sometimes at night, 15 years later, I think about what might have been and my heart starts thudding slow and hard enough to hurt. This happened to a good friend of our family. She had her youngest with her in the back seat of the car driving down the freeway. The kid was about 2 years old at the time and in a car seat. The child had dropped his toy and couldn't reach it. As he fussed and complained more and more, the mom finally relented and allowed him to undo his seat and climb out to grab this toy and then get right back in. What could go wrong? You are only talking about 10-15 seconds, right? While the boy climbed down through the seats to reach the toy, he used his hand to steady himself against the door, more specifically, the handle on the door. So while driving 60 miles per hour down the highway going around a bend in the road in rush hour traffic, the kid leaned against the handle on the door and the door flew open. The boy fell out and was holding onto the door for dear life by both hands. The mom described it to me as being in slow motion. She saw him outside the door holding on and dragging down the highway. She couldn't throw on the brakes or it would jerk him off the door. She said she just let off the accelerator and yelled, "Pull yourself in." As she did that, he looked right at her and fell off. The kid skidded and flopped through 3 lanes off traffic and ended up on the side of the freeway. He missed every car. She pulled over and ran back. Other motorists had already pulled over to render aid and got to him first. She got there and didn't know what to expect. In the end, there was nothing wrong with him, just some minor scrapes. Having kids myself, this story was hard to listen to when she was telling it to me and my wife. The emotion running back through her as she told the story was gut-wrenching. As she did that, he looked right at her and fell off. I just made the weirdest sound. Happened so often. Once I was throwing my 6-month-old up and 2 in the air. They giggle and love this, but not recommended. I didn't drop her, but I suddenly realized that her head was within inches of the ceiling fan running at full tilt. Oops. Later when she was learning to walk she had managed to climb the stairs a couple times unaided but with me standing behind her. Later, my mother is visiting when my daughter starts to do her stair trick. My mom suggests catching her, but me being the proud papa and slightly lazy, says just watch her, she's a pro. Sure enough, as she is about to disappear from view above the ceiling, just steps away from the top, she leans back to give us a big proud smile. Doesn't she just lose her balance and cartwheel all the way down to the tile floor below? How she survived that one I'll never know. My oldest son, now 18, decided to climb up a tall and heavy dresser when he was a toddler by pulling out the drawers and using them like stairs. Hearing a large crashing sound, I ran into the bedroom to see the dresser on top of my son. Fortunately, the drawers were extended in such a way as to create a pseudo-teepee around my son and he had a yay. So, look what I did, smirk on his face. Today, all bookshelves and drawers get mounted to the wall. This might not be seen by many, but I need to tell you about my brother. Age 3, he tries to escape after bedtime. Through the upstairs bedroom window. Our neighbor was going down a path behind the row of houses and saw him dangling out the window, with his twin sister holding on to him, trying to pull him back up. In the time it takes for the neighbor to vault over the 6-foot-high garden wall and bang on the door, my brother's actually fallen, and we find him sitting cross-legged on the floor in the back garden. Apparently he bounced, age 7-ish, on a family visit to a working farm with Shire horses, in Yorkshire somewhere. He's playing quite happily with his toy cars, running them up and down the fence of one of the paddocks. He drops one. It drops into where the horse is and of course he goes to fetch it from underneath the horse. He gets kicked in the forehead by a Shire horse. He's fallen out of trees, fallen off castle ruins and God knows what else. But it took him until age 22 to break a bone. He broke his foot by stepping off a road curb. When our daughter was really young I used to make baby food for her. I'd cook the meat and veggies then blend it in the blender. I normally put her in her high chair while I was preparing her meals but this particular day I hadn't. Thank God. So there I was, mixing the food in the blender and the thing decides to act up. It's pureeing the sides while leaving large chunks in the middle. I reached for the nearest utensil. Do not do this. I'm an idiot. Don't do this. A fork. I began stirring the very top layer of food in an attempt to get the blender to mix a little better, and next thing I knew the blade grabbed my fork, shot it out the bottom left corner of the blender, and slammed into the seat of the high chair at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Had my daughter been in the seat, she would have been impaled by that fork. Somewhere around the chest neck area is where it would have hit, probably killing her. I cried for a long time after that. I keep the gnarled, bend up fork in my drawer as a reminder of how easy it is to make a mistake like that. Another thing, had the fork gone out the right side of the blender, it would have been me with the fork in my belly. When I was about 12, my mother was cooking 30-clove garlic chicken. My sister and 2 little brothers were about to sit down to eat dinner when I happened to ask where she got the garlic. Mom says, "Oh, well, yesterday your father brought home a huge burlap bag of garlic from the farm." I quickly run out to the garage and see the bag of garlic. Whoops, guess mom didn't notice the huge skull and crossbones printed on the fricking label. I run back inside where everyone is seated at the table, ready to chow down. After yelling, "Don't eat the garlic chicken," I quickly call my father at work and ask him about the garlic in the garage. He fricking panics and tells me to grab the entire pot of garlic chicken and throw it in the garbage immediately. Turns out the garlic was planting garlic, which had been treated with some very nasty pesticides that, according to my father, would have probably blinded, if not killed all of us. TLDR. Mom cooked our family a delicious meal with poison-coated planting garlic. I threw it out before a bite was taken, probably saving my entire family's eyesight. My little brother has had many serious injuries, but none with as big a risk as this. We were camping up in Old Forge with our family for a week, and at about 9 PM we were going to head back up to our cabin. We look around and we couldn't see him anywhere. We are calling his name and running around. Then we hear a large growl and a young boy giggle, so we start booking it in that direction. We find my brother petting and feeding a baby black bear, with the mother bear sitting right next to him. The mother bear sees us, making a light noise, and then the bears are gone into the night. He was 2 when this happened to him and he still doesn't know. Here's a story about how my father basically saved me from natural selection. I was 2 or 3 and was playing in our yard while he was building the garage to our house. He went inside the house to get something, then when he left he accidentally left the gate open. I had been pushing around a small wheelbarrow and wanted to go play on the construction site. Went out of the gate and walked right behind a huge tree-axle dump truck, which was backing up right at me. My father says that he checked the mirror and just saw the front edge of the wheelbarrow peeking out from the side of the truck and yelled at the driver to stop. I was probably less than 2 feet from being crushed. He said he lost sleep for a few nights after that. This is the story my mom tells me. At the time we lived in a small town with one highway going through, and our house was directly off the highway. Now we had a lot of property, I'd guess around 10 or so acres, with 3 acres from the house to the highway. I was 4ish maybe, and my sister was 8. My mom, sister and I had just gotten back from grocery shopping. Oh yeah, I should mention I was a demon child and there was no controlling me. I digress. She was unloading groceries and I wanted to play in the sandbox in the front yard. Not in the mood to argue. She said fine and told my sister to watch me. Not a couple minutes later I am dragging a stick down the highway. Apparently I saw a stick and really wanted to drag it somewhere. An elderly couple whose son was killed by a hit and run saw me and made me got on the side of the road until my mom came running down the highway screaming after me. Another time, as I mentioned, I was a demon child. I would flush jewelry down the toilet and just ruin things for no reason. One morning, I apparently woke my mom up by saying, "Look what I can do," with a huge grin on my face. I was about to insert car keys into an electrical socket. My mom tackled me. I'm not a good father. Kicked a ball at my oldest. She got hit in the head. Head hit the wall. Concussion. Middle son complained electric bike was very slow. Rigged it for speed. Concussion. Broken arm. Convinced my oldest to ride a bike on a very steep road that ended in a Y junction. She couldn't decide what way to go. Went straight into the wall. The handlebar turned 90 and pushed into her belly, making a circular scar still visible 4 years later. The emergency room doctor said she was very lucky not to have serious internal bleeding or damaged organs. I was cleaning the wax on my surfboard, left it in the patio. Youngest tried to stand on it, slipped, concussion. I could go on and on really. This is just a small sample. Good news. Costco has 6 packs of bike helmets on sale. Great Christmas present for the family that loves concussions. In all seriousness though, you aren't that bad, just not thinking out all the possible horrible outcomes, which is probably best for your long-term health. And it sounds like everyone is okay. So my third child was maybe a few weeks old. I was still breastfeeding at the time. I wake up in the middle of the night, a hungry baby crying. Reach over to the bassinet to grab the little one. I place her between my legs to do a diaper change. I had the kind of bed that had little shelves built into the headboard, so I had a stash of diapers and wipes right behind me. I laid back to reach for the items, and being the tired mommy, I laid there thinking how good laying back down was. Well, of course I fell right back to sleep. At some point I decided to roll over. In my sleep, I was really aggravated at the pillow in between my legs. So, I kicked it off the bed. It took half a second to realize what I had done. Wide awake I shot out of bed, frantically searching the floor for the pillow I just kicked off the bed. Luckily there was a pile of dirty clothes next to the bed that she landed in. I scooped her up and gave her a good once over, got her back on the nip and all was well. Although it scared the pee out of me, she was not phased. Wait, she is gay now. Maybe I kicked the gay into her. Me and my brother were crazy children when we were toddler age. One day when I was about 2-3 years old, my mom was watching me and we were in Feb laundry room while she was doing laundry. She turns around from putting in a load of laundry to find me with the bottle of bleach lifted up to my mouth with my mouth over the end. She freaked out and didn't know what to do because she wasn't sure if I actually swallowed any. Luckily for us we lived only a few blocks from the hospital. She got to the hospital crying with a baby whom she thought was minutes from death and couldn't find a helpful doctor. Finally, after sobbing in a waiting room while holding me, she learned that I was okay and didn't swallow any. As for my brother, a near identical story happened. Just change where it says bleach to lamp oil, and it was my dad who was watching him at the time. Thankfully we are both still somehow alive and healthy today. This one's my fault. Not my kid, but a little cousin. Basically nephew since my sister is raising him. Now, kid's ticklish. Very ticklish. And is the type of kid that overreacts to everything. If you give him a poke on the ribs that should make him twist away a bit, he'll leap 3 feet away. One day, he's sitting at the table reading a book after eating breakfast. The book is flat on the table and he's hunched over it. I can't resist. I give him the classic neck scruff tickle. You know where you pinch around their neck right as it meets their shoulders? The kind that makes you scrunch your shoulders up and pull your head down like you're some kind of turtle human hybrid. Except he doesn't react like that. He, unexpectedly, overreacts to the sensation and jerks his head violently downward about 8 inches to get away. Problem was, the table was only about 6 inches away from his face. Luckily he didn't do any serious damage, and I felt a little bad as I was laying on the ground laughing my butt off. I have not personally come close, knock on wood, to doing severe harm, but my dad tells a horrifying tale. When I was about 2 years old and my brother was going on 4 and 1/2, my parents took us and our older sister to Coney Island. My dad decided to take my brother and me on the Cyclone, the old wooden roller coaster. My mom and sister, wise women, declined. Back in those days, my dad said, there were no height or age restrictions and very little in the way of safety restraints. He sat in the middle and had us on either side of him. Thus began the longest 2 minutes of his life. He said that almost immediately, he realized that he was having a hard time holding on to us. In the first fast turn after the initial drop, he almost lost me. Then he almost lost my brother after he had wrapped me up in one arm and tried to hold on to the safety bar with the other. From then on, he said it was all he could do to keep us in each arm and hold on to us while trying to brace himself with his feet. When the car stopped, my mom says, my dad was white as a sheet, where he wasn't green, trembling, sweating and could not let us go or get out of the car for a couple minutes. She had never before, and never since, seen him scared of anything, and he told her later that night that he simply knew he would lose us both and live through our funerals, his divorce and suicide in the 90 seconds or so it took the ride to end. He still tells this story more vividly than any other tale, and he has men and still gets a haunted look in his eyes to this day. I am going on 50. I thought it would be okay to fill the tub up to my 5-month-old's chin. That way she'd really love the water. Then she got lathered up and slipped out of my hands. She was so soapy, I couldn't get a grip on her. She spent a solid 4 Mississippi underwater. Worst dad ever? Yep. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.